I love cars. I love everything about them. I especially really like car rebuilds. I think that's so cool to get an awesome car, a cool car back on the road. It's just one of the coolest things ever, in my opinion. And speaking of that, Mat Armstrong. Okay, I've been watching him. That's what he does. That's his whole thing. Mat Armstrong's whole thing is rebuilding cars, bringing these beautiful pieces of art back to life, roaring back to life. That's why I like him so much. And he just put out a new video, excuse me, on his Ferrari, his new Ferrari 430, I believe it is. And this thing is very cool. It's a very cool car, and it's a very cool build. And I'm just happy we get to sit here and go along for the ride and see this thing from start to finish. It's so cool. When I first saw his channel, I was like binge watching it. I was binge watching it, went through all his playlists, got to see these cars from start to finish. It's just amazing. There's so much work that goes into that. There's so much dedication, time, things you don't see, stress, anxiety. There's so much that goes into this. And so he's been blowing up, and you got to respect it. So without further ado, I guess we'll get into it. Let's watch his new video.
This Ferrari is missing one vital component.
An engine.
But even still, without the vital component, it cost me £60,000, which may sound expensive, but
that car looks pretty good. Like, there's no major damage on this car, so it's not like it's been rolled or completely destroyed like his other projects. Like this car, this should be a piece of cake for him. For Matt, I mean, this is a piece of cake, man. He doesn't have to take the roof off. He doesn't have to take the whole car apart. So, yeah, he spent $60,000 on it, but it's not in like horrible shape. Yes, it doesn't have an engine, which is arguably very important. Arguably. But, that can be arranged. And this car is a manual, a gated manual. So that is super rare and super fun. And I think it was worth it. I think it was worth it for him to get this car. But it looks really good right here. Just off the bat. Cleaned up really nice for what it is.
As for a reason, this car comes with a gated manual gearbox. And according to Google, of the 15,000 F430s that were made, only 1,500 of them were manual.
Rare.
Making this car pretty rare and expensive. This could turn out to be a pretty good bargain, providing we can get this engine back together. The engine that I got with this car came in a million pieces. As 11 years ago it was taken apart to fix something but never got put back together. But my good friend Tavares donated me a spare engine, but with one problem. And that is what happens when you try and compare.
First of all, Tavares, if you guys don't know him, he's rebuilding a P1, a McLaren P1, a $2 million car that got flooded, completely flooded. And he's also a very cool guy. We'll be reacting to some of his videos when he posts some new ones, but he's a really nice guy. To give him an engine, donate an engine, that's very nice. And I'm pretty sure Ferrari doesn't sell, they don't just sell engines, like they don't sell rebuilt engines. So they're kind of hard to come by. So I respect this Mr. Tavares, Freddie. I really respect him for doing that. It's really nice.
Press a fluid. So me and my dad have been attempting to rebuild the engine, but there was an issue. We couldn't get any information or torque specs from Ferrari. They won't give you them. But that was until today. We think we have a breakthrough. Thanks to you guys, I've managed to get my hands on a workshop manual, but it is for a Maserati. But this Maserati engine is also used in the 430. Because the Italians like to share, and later in the video, we find that the French also like to share with the Italians as well.
Oh,
the
really?
cylinders are now ready for the pistons. But before we do that, we need to change the piston rings. There's 3 of them on this piston. The lower piston ring is called the oil ring, which stops oil getting into the combustion chamber. And then the top 2 piston rings are used for compression, to keep a nice tight seal in the combustion chamber. And if those were worn out, then you'd lose a lot of power and you'd definitely be burning a lot of oil. First, my dad's using an old piston ring to clean up the recesses of where the new piston rings will go. Then before we fit the ring into the piston, we're going to slide the ring in the cylinder. Now
Yeah, you have to make sure those things are super clean. You do not want any scoring at all. You don't want oil getting in. You need all the power you can get. And, it's funny, I was working in a shop, and we worked on like small engines, like 2-stroke engines, stuff like that. This one lady brought in 3 chainsaws, steel chainsaws. And she said, every one of them, I don't know what's wrong, it's just not running correctly. Like, one of them will start, and it'll immediately die. And the other 2 just don't start at all. And we're like, okay, interesting. What's the common denominator here? This lady, obviously. So anyways, we checked them out. Guess what? Scoring on the cylinder. It's a horrible thing. And guess what the problem was with all 3 of them? Same thing. Scoring on the cylinder. So she must have not mixed the gas correctly, because you got to mix oil with those 2-stroke engines. But it just is like amazing what some people do, And it's not worth working on them, because by the time we got done working with them, it would cost the same as just her going out and buying a brand new one. Now there's 3 chainsaws that are relatively new with ruined engines, so it's just real sad. Anyway, sorry to get off on this tangent, but we were watching something about pistons, so it's justifiable. Right?
Notice a little gap in the piston ring. This is called piston ring gap. And this has to be a specific size. If the gap is too big, as I mentioned, you'll burn a lot of oil. And we won't have the right compression. But if the gap is too small, then when the engine heats up, the piston ring will expand, and it will have nowhere to go but to score up the inside of the cylinder sleeve. Our piston ring gap is all good, so now we're loading up the piston rings into the piston. And now that they're in the piston, we can begin to put them finally in the cylinders. This special bit of kit squashes the rings into the piston.
Very cool.
And then we can knock the piston into the cylinder. And we've just got to do that.
What I was saying earlier in my last stream was about these specialized tools that they have. They really do have a tool for everything. And you got to realize that, because I probably would have been working on this, trying to squish them together with 2 pairs of, with 2 screwdrivers, And that engine probably would have not ran if I did it. But this tool is life-changing. They've got a tool for everything. You sort of forget that sometimes when you're working on cars. Yeah, you might not be able to afford one. That is also a scenario that could happen, and that is very true for a lot of us, sadly. But if you can afford tools and collect tools, do it. As many as you can. Especially if you're going to be working on something a lot. You need specialized tools. I don't know.
7 more times. Oh, it's well heavier now.
I told you it's heavy. Old Dad.
We're moving, and now it's time for the bottom end bearings. The funny thing about these bottom end bearings is that they make different ones depending on the engine, and we've all got different sizes, different tolerances. The only thing we could do is look at the part number on the old ones and match them up. Easy as that, but fairly simple to go in. The big end bearings slide in at the bottom of the conrod.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
And once they're in the bottom of the conrod, it's time for the main bearings. These bearings are what the crankshaft rotates on. We have an issue, and we don't think it can be solved. So if the engine goes bang, and it's because of this reason, it's not our fault. Okay, so check out these bearings here, the main bearings. They slide from left to right, which doesn't look right, because then it's covering over the sort of oil gallery there. Like if that covers over, then the oil is not going to get through onto there. But on the old bearings, which you can see here, they've got a tab on the top here, a big one, to stop it from sliding left to right. But on the new ones, they've got only a small tab compared to the old bearings. So this is going to be a little bit more serious than we first thought, and confusing. If you go on the website here, you can see that the bearing that we're after is 195307, which is also used in the Maserati engines. But if you click on the Maserati one, the part number has now superseded, so it's changed to 28632, which is the bearing that we've got. But if you click on the Ferrari one, there's no supersession to that part number. The part number has stayed the same, which in our heads doesn't make any sense. Because why would they change it for one engine and not the other when the engines are exactly the same? Well, they might be exactly the same in my opinion. Now, we didn't want to run the risk of ruining the engine because one of these bearings has slid over and covered an oil gallery. So instead, we went back and ordered the original part number.
Yeah, you got to be careful. You don't want to get sued. You know, he's going to be walking on eggshells in these Ferrari videos. We love Ferrari. We do. They make some amazing cars. And they have the right to do whatever they want. But, just saying.
From Ferrari with the bigger tab on it. We have got, well, I've ordered the correct part number from Marinello Parts. It's come next day. Yeah. And it's got the big tab on.
Good.
We're going to put these in. I don't know why Maserati have superseded their one, but we're going to ignore that. And we're going to put these in. At least now we can have some peace of mind that we're putting in the same part number as what came out of the engine. And once they were in, it's time for the crankshaft to go in.
What do you do now, Tony?
I don't know.
And it's back onto the other half of the big end bearings, which slide into the conrod cap, and then the conrod cap meets the rest of the conrod with some new bolts going in there, making sure to match the numbers on the conrod cap to the conrod.
Very nice.
Can you not hear that, really?
Oh, God, hear
What?
I'm in charge of torquing everything up because my dad can't hear the beep of the torque wrench. And the conrod bolts have a torque setting and then an angle you have to turn them to.
Oh, yeah, I could use
Really?
that one.
After the torque is done. Interesting.
And once I've torqued all the conrod bolts up, it's time to prep the crankcase so the other half of it can join together. It says in the manual to run a bead of flange sealant across the crankcase in before it meets, so that's exactly what we're doing. And with the main bearings installed on the other half of the crankcase, we can now slide it together.
It's coming together. It's always awesome to see an engine just coming together. When it's all parts laid out on the floor, to when it comes together into this beautiful heart and soul of a beautiful car. I don't know, it just warms my heart. It just warms it right up, man. You love to see it. You really do.
That's why we needed the manual, because even these washers are machined on one side, so they have one way of going on, and we just whacked them all on. So I'm going to put it all on now the right way. All of these stages are super vital. One mistake here could mean the whole engine would have to come back out again and stripped completely apart.
You don't want to break a bolt. You don't want to mess up. You don't want to leave a seal off and it start leaking later. You don't want to do any of that stuff. I remember the first engine I worked on rebuilding. I broke a bolt right off, right into the front of the engine. those things are so hard to get out. They have like, easy outs. They say easy outs. There's nothing easy about that. Nothing at all. It's a horrible feeling. You gotta watch out for those bolts. Some are just not as strong as you think. Bolts are not unbreakable. With enough torque, you can break them easy.
New seals into the oil pump and the water pump, which is built as one, and it's now joined back together. It's all together. It's looking good. We've got a new rear main seal to go in, which my dad's about to put in. Go on. Yeah. No. And whilst my dad is putting that in, he has never tried a Y food. Now we're gonna get him to choose from the fruity range: mango, peach.
We'll skip this real quick.
Is the cylinder heads right and left, but to time this engine up, we need to know top dead center of cylinder number 1, which is this cylinder here. Top dead center being when the piston is at the highest point, and then we time the engine up based on that. Now to find this,
super important, by the way, for people who don't know that, timing is super important. I had to replace a head gasket on my truck, and I just tried to do it myself, because I don't like asking for help. And I took it apart, thought I had the timing marked correctly. I had to go a little bit deeper than I thought I was going to have to go. Take the chain off, take the, everything off. Well, you have to take it off to take the head off so you can change the head gasket. And then I messed the timing all up, and it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. But you don't know what you don't know. You got to before you just put it all together, you gotta go slowly if you need to, even though it seems like no progress is being made. That's better than putting the whole engine back together and it doesn't start because you don't have timing. Just saying.
we've got a DTI gauge here, and we're going to turn the crank over and make sure we get this absolutely bang on TDC. The engine's going to have a little bit of float, which means the piston is going to be at the top even when we're turning it sometimes. So we've got to make sure we're bang on that. So this is how we're going to do it. First, my dad's going to turn the engine clockwise, and once this piston gets to the highest point, it will give me the highest reading on the DTI gauge. I'm then going to mark it on our contraption that we've built here on the flywheel side. Then my dad's going to go back, turn the engine anti-clockwise, and as soon as it hits that same reading as before, I'm going to make another mark on our contraption. The top dead center will be between those two marks, which I've done with a really thick pen. I've not helped myself, but there's not much float in the engine, so
not bad.
Boom. Time for the cylinder heads. Of course, you can't put the cylinder heads on without the head gasket.
Of course.
So on goes a brand new head gasket, both sides. I put the washers onto a screwdriver first, which helps me slide the washer over the stud. And I do the same.
Just little things like that. You know, that's working smarter, not harder. How many of you guys would think to do that? Who knows? I don't know if I would think to do that. So I'm not talking bad. I'm just saying. You gotta just maximize your working, your working potential. You gotta think about these things. How can I make it easier? How will this? What is the best possible way to do this? Whatever you're doing.
For the nuts as well. 2 heads on, head bolts on, or head nuts on. You know it's serious when the glasses come out.
Okay.
Now the procedure to tighten the head nuts is 60 Newton meters. And once that's done, you then go back and turn them an extra 90 degrees. And this has to be done from the middle, working outwards. And it is really important that we get this right.
Yes,
that extra 90 degrees on the 60 Newton meters of torque made these head bolts pretty tight. After that, I can then put in the valve lifters.
That was giving me PTSD.
I hope all of you guys watching are managing to follow along, because this is as hard for me to explain as it is for me to do. This is the second engine I've ever rebuilt. And now with the cylinder heads and the camshafts on, we can begin to start thinking about the timing of the engine. We've got it wrong. So we thought piston number 1 was here, then it worked all the way down, but we read the manual upside down, and piston number 1 is all the way over here,
there,
which means we've got the timing for the top dead center thing wrong. So if we got that wrong and then we timed it up, it wouldn't have worked and it would have broke the engine. So now we're going to have to do piston number 1, which is here, work out what top dead center is on there, so when the piston's right at the top, and
same thing all over again, you know. But that's really what it is with working on engines. You just run into obstacles and you have to overcome them, and you have to be very patient, because if you're not patient, you can easily just become super frustrated. Trust me, I love cars, I love engines, I love the way they work, and I thought I would love working on engines, right? Oh, this is gonna be so fun. I'm gonna get this truck, a little project car, rebuild the engine, you know, work on it. And lo and behold, I started working on it, and you got to get your hands in these tight little spaces, and bolts break, and nuts fall into places you can't find them, and you drop this, and you drop this in the engine, in the oil pan, this and that. It's like, I don't know if I like this. And so you just have to realize that stuff like that's going to happen. When you're working on engines, it's not going to go perfect. But what does? Really? What really does go perfect every time? Probably nothing. So just keep that in mind, you know. Keep it in mind, work on patience.
Park it here, then we can begin timing the whole engine. Okay. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So we're doing the same procedure as before, but this time the cylinder heads are on. And once we've found top dead center, we can now start adding all the chains, which keeps the bottom half of the engine in time with the top half of the engine. You can see we're using a photo that I took before we took it apart to put this thing back together. Just pure genius. This is a nightmare. There's a really complicated way of how to time this engine, and if I try and explain it, I'll lose myself. But in the most simple terms, we've got to keep this piston at top dead center, and then if you just come around here, the cams here, there's a little dot on the cam there and a little dot on the cam there. They've got to align. These dots have got to align with these little grooves here, both sides as well. And the way you adjust this top, so you wouldn't do these bolts here, you wouldn't do these bolts, and that allows you to turn the cam without moving the chain and the whole engine.
That's actually very nice.
This is so vital, because this controls when the valves open to let fuel and air in, and to let the exhaust gases out. And if they open and close at the wrong time, they could be hitting into the piston. So we've got to make sure that this is absolutely spot on. Okay, if we've done this right, it should turn over now. So let's check it all still stays in the right place. So
it should be coming up now.
Okay, keep coming, slow, keep going. Yeah. Yeah, that's on. That's on. That's on.
Oh my goodness. Congratulations, good job.
We're on and we're timed up and it works. It actually spins. Vital stages done, and it's on to the final pieces. I'm about to put on the chain cover. I've put in a new seal on it. I've run a line of sealant around the edge and a new gasket on it as well, and I can knock it onto the side of the engine. There's then 2 cam variator sensors which sit inside the head, and after that,
that's another thing about this truck I'm talking about. We'll come back to the truck, you know, every once in a while in this video, I'm sure. But this stuff just reminds me of it. But yeah, working on the truck, okay, so I messed up the timing after I replaced the head gasket. And the way the engine was, the front part of the engine, the cover that covers the chain, the head gasket, it went under the head gasket. So the head came over, and there was a little lip. That thing fit underneath it. And it was that front plate was sandwiched in between the oil pan on the bottom and the head on the top, right? Okay, so there's two gaskets. Oil pan gasket, head gasket. And so me messing up the timing, I had to keep taking that plate off and on, off and on. And guess what? It's really tight in there. So I messed up the head gasket. And I messed up the oil pan gasket. So now I was trying to work on the truck or on the engine in the truck without taking it out. But now I just have to take it all back out again. This truck is really a nightmare. If any one of you want to buy it, just let me know. Okay? It's an 85 Nissan Datsun 720 pickup, 4-wheel drive. So, text me. Email me.
I can put on the rocker cover with the new gasket as well, of course. I'm happy with that. I can't put the other rocker cover on yet because we're missing a sensor over here, but for a non-professional and someone who was building cars in a restaurant car park 4 years ago, to put a Ferrari engine back together and now it actually turns over is a pretty solid achievement.
It is.
But now
Congratulations.
it's going to get a little harder, and of course we have an issue with the gearbox, but let me take it back. Inside here is the remains of the manual gearbox, the original manual gearbox. And let's be honest, unless you're Rain Man, this is not getting repaired. Like, I just can't, we don't know if there's going to be missing parts out of this. We have no diagrams out of this. We've got all the gears, the selectors, the shafts. I mean, I have no experience with rebuilding gearboxes. Do you?
Bit, but not when in that state.
No, so we're willing to accept defeat on this until we saw the price of a gearbox from Ferrari. It's expensive. In my opinion, it's expensive. A brand new gearbox after VAT would cost you over £30,000. So buying one of them was out of the question.
Wait, £30,000, which is even more in dollars, right? Wow. Yeah, you're gonna rebuild it. That's what you're gonna do.
So second hand, you're looking at £15,000 for a gearbox, and they're an automatic one. Of course, we've got a gated manual box, but then we figured out that the gearbox that from the automatic and the manual are exactly the same. The only difference is the shifter. Well, we hope they're exactly the same.
Oh, okay.
So I managed to get a second-hand gearbox for £4,000. There's an issue. Here it is. This came off a fire-damaged Ferrari in Poland, and there's a hole in the side. We're hoping it hasn't caused any damage to the inside of it, but this is the mechanism for the F.
That would suck if they bought this new gearbox and it was just all burnt up inside, froze up, rusted up. That would be horrible. But you got to take a chance sometimes, because what if? There's two sides. It can either turn out very well or turn out very badly. So, sometimes when there's that much money involved in buying a new one, or even a second-hand, 14,000 refurbished one, sometimes you just got to take that chance.
One gearbox, the automatic one. It automatically selects the gears with hydraulic shifters. I think if we take this part off, and of course the broken part off, we can make this into a manual box, and we would have a manual box for £4,000.
Beautiful.
Providing there's no damage here. Buying this box was a bit of a risk, but so was buying the car, and some risks pay off and others don't. I'm just hoping that this risk does. I hope that.
Now guys, what did I just finish saying? Just saying.
There's no more damage inside that gearbox.
Doesn't look bad.
Oh, that's been in water.
Is it?
Oh, how did it get rusty?
It's been in water.
Maybe it isn't good.
Oh, it's
Uh-oh.
the Titanic. The inside of the gearbox for some reason looked really wet, and not with oil, with water. So we had it.
Create a professional logo that best reflects your brand. Just go to Wix.
No choice but to start stripping this one apart to check for damage.
Oh, no.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my god. Well, it's a good job we took it apart. Look at the bearing.
Oh my days.
So the fire's gone in there and caused destruction.
Absolute
Complete
perish.
destruction.
Do you think the oil set on fire that was in the gearbox?
Oh, it could have. Because look, it's all black in here, isn't it?
Well, what else would burn? What else would make the gearbox burn? You know what I mean? Like, what else? I mean, I'm sorry, but what else? The oil would burn. Straight metal wouldn't burn. It's not like the fire's just blowing through that little hole. So, yeah, I'd assume it's the oil.
Matt's
Good
facts.
call.
Sorry.
Which ain't good news.
Not at all, is it really?
Not when you're trying
I
to
feel
turn
bad
the
for
gearbox out, so it's set on fire.
Do these even turn?
Yeah, like that, all those bearings in here could look like that.
I think that was the car got it off.
That does not look good.
Oh.
No. No.
Do you know when you're on eBay and you're looking for a gearbox and you see that?
Yeah, well, it's $4,000 as opposed to 15.
You gotta take the chance.
Yeah, it's $4,000
Yeah.
for a reason.
So now. Thank you. So now. Thank you. So now we have, well, two bad gearboxes really, and I don't even know where we're going to
Man.
start or even finish with this. I've got to order loads of bearings for this, as I've got to order a lot of parts for the engine. But before I carry on with this, I mentioned at the start of the video that the French like to share with the Italian, and I'm about to find out whether that's true or not. When I picked up the Ferrari, it was missing a window regulator, and there was only a block of wood holding the window up, which was bad news. The good
It's
news
a show car.
was
He said it was a show car. They just had it in a like on display somewhere. So, you know, do your best to hide the damage. You don't need a gear holding the window up. You got a piece of wood. As long as the window's up, right? As long as the bumper's in place, even if it's by duct tape, then it's all good. As long as from 10 feet away, 5 feet away, it looks okay. Then it's all good, man.
we have a regulator on this side. And the other good news is that we found the window regulator, but it's just missing a motor. And we've taken off the motor of this window regulator, as you can see here, and just checked the part numbers on the back, and it's a Bosch motor. For a brand new window motor for the Ferrari, it's £178. And the cheapest one I could find second hand was 120.
Wow.
And that's the wrong side. But I copied the part number into eBay and then found out that that motor could be used on a well-known French car, in my opinion, called a Peugeot 406. And here we have the motor of the French car, which there is some slight differences. But generally, it looks pretty... Oh, in fact, that one is a little bit longer. It may work, it may not work. The connections are slightly different, but they're only a 2-pin connection and a 2-pin connection, so we could make that work. But this one could possibly work. It's not exactly the same.
Interesting.
But it could work. But I guess we're going to find that out in the next video. So thanks so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button.
We did. Thank you very much, Matt. You're doing great. Keep going. And, you know, hopefully me and Matt can meet up sometime in person. I'd love to see him in person. I've got a long ways to go to be able to do that, and I know that. But, you know, you can always dream. That's free. Just saying. You can always dream. All right.